Are you still digging in your garden? You know, turning over a tired bed, incorporating some compost to bring it back to life? Or maybe you're thinking of making a new bed and you're planning on digging up the soil before adding your plants.
If you are, then save yourself a whole lot of back-breaking work and put down the spade. It's actually better for your plants and for yourself if you don't dig.
We recently moved into this house and we are on a mission to bring our overgrown garden back to life by clearing weeds, pruning shrubs and bringing new planting. This bed is particularly weedy and we've been itching to give it an overhaul since we moved in. We waited to see what would grow first, and now that summer's here, it's time to give it a makeover.
When we first started gardening at our old house, we felt overwhelmed by the messy beds and would often grab a spade to dig them up. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Dig, add compost, turn the soil and then plant. But today, and from now on, we won't be digging, and neither should you. Here's why. Not only is digging and tilling back-breaking work, it's also bad for your soil. Now this happens because digging breaks up the soil's natural structure, damages helpful fungi, and exposes tiny organisms to air and sunlight, making the soil less healthy over time. So, if digging is not the way to go, what do we do instead? Basically, the opposite. No dig. So we'll show you how we're transforming a tired garden bed using the no-dig gardening method.
No-dig gardening is a way to grow plants without disturbing the soil by digging or tilling. Instead of turning the soil, you'll just add things like compost, mulch, cardboard right on top. Then let nature take over. Worms and other tiny creatures will break it down and help make the soil better and healthier over time.
It holds water well, drains properly, has fewer weeds, and it's much less work for you. So we can put the spade away.
This bed is in front of our raised beds, and our plan here is to turn it into a beautiful flower border that will attract bees and butterflies and other pollinators to help fertilise the plants in our vegetable garden. So what have we got in here at the moment? So we've got some grasses, which we're not keen on. We've got quite a lot of weeds in here. This is a common columbine, which I think are really pretty, so I'd like to keep those in. There's a few bulbs in here, and the great thing about no dig is we won't disturb them when we plant our new plants, so they should come back up again next year. We've got a wild geranium, and the bees will just absolutely love this, and it's great to have something low down at the front of the bed. And over here we've got some bistorta. We've got this growing absolutely all over our garden and we are not keen on it at all, so we'll take that out. And then over here we've also got some lungwort. It's got pretty little blue flowers. The bees absolutely love it. They've been buzzing around it for months now. And anything we do take out, we'll just put onto the compost.
Before planting anything new, we're going to improve the soil by adding a good layer of compost, about 2 or 3 inches or so. As the compost breaks down, it feeds the soil below naturally, thanks to earthworms and tiny microbes, so there's no need to dig. This compost layer also helps keep moisture in, stops weeds from growing and protects the soil from washing away or getting too hot or too cold, making it perfect for growing healthy plants. Now, to further help with weeds, you can add a layer of cardboard onto the surface of the soil before you add the compost. Wet it down and then add your compost on top. And that's what we're going to do in the 2 areas where the grasses were. Put a layer of cardboard on to stop them coming back up.
Now, let's invite in the pollinators. Perennial plants are a great choice because they come back year after year. The ones we've chosen will attract bees, butterflies and other helpful insects. So at the back we've got some globe artichokes that we'll plant. We planted quite a few globe artichokes from seed and we will harvest some of them, but they also look really pretty for kind of ornamental purposes in a bed. This one is already looking absolutely stunning. This is a lupin. One thing you really need to think about is not what height they are when you buy them, but what height they'll be in the future. So although some of the smaller plants are at the back, they'll grow to be taller. So things like the delphinium and the foxgloves will grow a lot taller. We've also got some verbena, so for some little pops of colour throughout the bed. If you've had trouble growing lavender in the past, I'd really recommend trying the Peter. We find it a lot easier than lavender and it has like the same kind of feel to it. We've also got some salvia, that kind of really looks really nice in the wind swaying.
The no-dig way is to simply plant directly into the compost layer on top of the soil, using your hands or a trowel to make a hole just deep enough for the plant's roots. Place the plant in and gently firm the compost around to ensure good contact. There's no need to dig into the soil beneath, as the roots will naturally grow down through the compost and into the layers below. If you added cardboard before the compost like we did, then you can simply cut out a hole to allow the roots to grow into the soil. So we'll start at the back with our taller plants. Well, what a transformation, eh?
Gorgeous. Should we take a look at the before shot? From weedy mess to thriving, pollinator-friendly, herbaceous border.
Everyone says you need deep raised beds with logs at the bottom and loads of topsoil and compost, but what if you don't? We're doing it the no-dig way. No logs, no digging and barely any effort. And we'll show you why this simple, shallow setup might work better than a traditional advice.
If you've ever thought about building a raised bed but talked yourself out of it because it sounded like a big project, then think again. Let's go.
Let's.
So the first step is deciding where to put the new beds. We've chosen this area of the lawn because it gets plenty of sun, with the sun coming up over there behind the house and setting here behind the trees. So if you're building your first bed, this is really the first thing you should consider. It's very important.
There's a cat there. There will be trees behind which will cast some shade on that side of the raised bed, but we don't think that's such a bad thing because That means we'll be able to plant some crops that prefer the shade, like leafy greens for example. And then we'll have some sun lovers on this end.
This spot is also close to our other raised beds, so it will complete the kitchen garden vibe nicely. Our pollinator-friendly border sits nicely in between, so we should have plenty of bees and butterflies pollinating our crops.
And convenience is also super important. We near the compost bins over there, so we can just chuck things in when we need to. We have the greenhouse behind us, so we can easily transplant our seedlings from greenhouse straight into raised beds.
Yeah.
I ordered these wooden frames online and thankfully they were really easy to assemble. They're made from pressure treated softwood and slot together dead easy with screws. And I definitely didn't shred 2 drill bits doing the job, definitely not. Now you could absolutely build your own if you're handy, but we went for speed and ease this time.
Now you might think that raised beds need to be really deep, but actually shallow beds have got a lot going for them. First of all, the deeper the bed, the more materials like topsoil and compost you'll need to fill it. Plus, wood that you'll need to build it isn't cheap, so shallow beds work out a lot cheaper. Second, it's not like the higher the raised bed, the better your plants. Your plants aren't going to just grow into the raised bit. They can send their roots deep down into the earth below, and that's a good thing. Because soil at ground level dries out more slowly than in tall raised beds, shallow beds often need watering less.
You might have seen people online building raised beds with logs and sticks at the bottom, something called hugelkultur. It's meant to improve drainage, hold on to moisture, and slowly feed the plants as the wood breaks down. But we're not going to be using any logs at the bottom of our raised beds, as anything bulky would just block the roots, especially with crops like artichoke or corn that want to grow deep roots. Hugelkultur works best in really deep beds, like at least 3 feet tall. If you do want to build a giant hugel mound, then go for it. But just bear in mind that you'll need very high beds to accommodate the logs, as well as a good layer of soil, and the cost of all that soon adds up.
You could even forget about the frames altogether and build a bed straight onto the ground. But we wanted ours to be slightly raised so that the soil warms up quicker in spring. Plus, we like how the raised beds look, and we're hoping that the kids are less likely to trample all over them if they're off the ground a bit.
To start our beds, we won't be digging or turning anything. That's the beauty of no dig. No dig gardening is all about growing plants without breaking up the soil. Instead of digging or tilling, you simply layer materials like compost and mulch on top, and from there, nature does the hard work. Worms and other soil life break everything down and improve the soil structure over time. The result is healthier soil that holds moisture better, drains well, has fewer weeds, and needs far less effort from you.
We're starting our beds with a base of cardboard. There's absolutely no need to line your raised beds with plastic landscape fabric. We think it's best to limit the amount of plastic we use in the garden as much as possible. A layer of cardboard will smother weeds and grass just fine without digging. Charles Dowding, the champion of no-dig gardening, recommends cardboard for starting new beds because it blocks out light, stops weeds from growing, and breaks down naturally within a few months. Just make sure it's brown, plain, and non-glossy, no tape, staples, or stickers.
Next, we'll add compost straight on top and plant directly into the compost layer. We won't be padding out our beds with any topsoil, and that's because compost is packed with more nutrients than topsoil, so it feeds your plants better and helps the soil stay nice and moist and healthy over time. Couldn't be simpler. So we've got a fair amount of compost to shift, so we best get cracking. Now that was a lot of back-breaking work. So to fill these 4 raised beds, we've used 3.5 tons of compost. So I'm glad they are shallow and not those big metal tall raised beds that we'd use for hugelkultur. Now, you might be wondering why we were treading all over our beds. Tamping down soil in a raised bed helps to ensure a nice, stable and compact base for planting. It removes air pockets and helps the soil settle, avoiding significant settling later on. This means we can start planting straight away, but you would have noticed as we were adding the compost to these beds, quite a lot of steam was coming off. Now that means that this compost might not be ready to accept plants, getting a bit too hot. But Mrs. Sheffield is going to tell us what we're going to be planting in here in a bit.
We've got a mix of veg we started from seed. I sowed these tomatoes back in March and we've basically run out of space in the greenhouse, so we're going to try some in the raised beds. They've been acclimatising to the great outdoors for a couple of weeks, so hopefully they shouldn't be a big shock when we plant them outside. I also sowed some globe artichokes and they're desperately in need in moving on from their pots. It also looks like the slugs have been a bit keen, so we will see how they fare in the raised beds. Plus we've got some sweet corn. We did have 5, but we're down to 4 because someone was a bit keen with the strimmer. It wasn't me. And I'm also excited to plant these courgettes or zucchini if you're across the pond. They're just starting to flower, so really exciting times.
So it's been a good 2 weeks since our last bit of filming. That's because the compost was a bit too warm to plant into, so we've been trying to let it cool down, potentially still a little bit too warm, but we'll see how we get on. We filled up 3 beds with the plants that were outgrowing our greenhouse. That bed looks bare, but there are 2 seeds in there, just 2. Squash, pumpkin, 2 pumpkin seeds. Apparently you need over 1 metre spacing, so they're going to take up the whole of that bed, which I wasn't too keen on, but never mind. Tomatoes, cherry tomatoes in that one, so that's a nice sunny bed, so hopefully they'll grow red for us. They'll ripen up, which is normally quite difficult in our temperate climate. This one is 2 plants, artichokes, again spaced apart quite nicely because they do get quite big, and then sunflowers. So they're Titan sunflowers, so they potentially grow very tall, so they have potential to shade out those tomatoes, but we'll see what happens. And a top tip for sunflowers is to plant them on the west side of your garden, which is what this area here is, so that the sunflower heads will track the sun and they'll face into your garden.
Top tip. So over here we've got a grid of corn, and the reason it's in a grid, a square, rather than in rows is so that the air can circulate and help pollinate the corn. And then lower down we've got courgette plants, so they're interplanted in that bed, and this is a bit of a nod to the 3 sisters method, where you have corn, courgettes and normally beans growing together, but we didn't have any beans, so we've also put some pea pods in there as well in rows.
The only downside to a shallow bed is they do end up bending quite a bit more, so I do start to feel it in my back, but I suppose getting stuck in is part of the fun of gardening, right?
Absolutely. Let us know in the comments, are you team shallow bed or team tall bed?
Leaving your soil bare, particularly during winter, is one of the worst things you can do to it. When the growing season comes to an end, one of the most important jobs in the garden is to protect the soil in our beds to get the best harvest next year.
Bare soil is vulnerable. In autumn and winter, heavy rain washes nutrients away. Cold and wet weather break down the soil structure, and by spring we are left with compacted, lifeless patch that's full of weeds and needs a lot of work.
So what can we do to protect our beds over winter? Well, we've got a few options, and there is one in particular that we love because of all the benefits it gives and how easy it is to do. So one option is to add a thick layer of mulch which helps insulate the soil and keeps weeds down. This is something we definitely recommend.
Another option is to plant hardy winter crops like broad beans and spinach for early harvest. But beyond mulching and growing a few hardy veg, there's another clever option that not only protects the soil but actively improves it while you wait for spring. And that is planting a cover crop.
A cover crop is a living protector for your soil. While it grows, it forms a dense canopy that shields the ground from pounding rain, cold winds and frosts. Its roots hold valuable nutrients in place so they don't wash away, and at the same time they feed the beneficial microbes and fungi. The greenery above smothers the weeds before they can take hold, while the roots work below, breaking through compaction and leaving behind channels that improve aeration and drainage long after the plants have died back.
Farmers have used cover crops for centuries to protect and enrich their fields between main harvests. When ploughed in or left as a mulch, they boost fertility and improve soil structure. We can use the exact same methods in our own garden, filling empty beds over winter with cover crops to protect the soil and set it up for stronger growth next spring.
Now, there are lots of different cover crops you can choose from, such as rye, clover, vetch or field beans, but we're going to be planting white mustard. Now, white mustard has some clever advantages that make it perfect for gardeners like us, and the main one being that it's very fast growing. From sowing to a full green carpet it only takes about 4 to 6 weeks. That means even if you're a bit late clearing a bed, mustard will still take off and cover the ground before the first frost of the off-season. Another great thing about white mustard is that it's brilliant at suppressing weeds. Mustard produces so much leafy growth so quickly that weeds simply don't get a look in. Within just a few weeks of sowing, you'll have a dense green carpet that shades the soil and crowds out any unwanted seedlings. Because the mustard is hogging all the light, weeds simply don't stand a chance. So instead of spending your time in spring pulling out dandelions and nettles, you'll be left with a manageable cover crop that's easy to chop down and compost. So it's a really clever way of letting the plants do the hard work for you. And then the roots of white mustard are great at breaking up compaction. They push down into the soil, opening up little channels, and when the roots die back, those channels stay behind, making it easier for spring rain to drain and for veg roots to penetrate. By the time you're ready to plant, you're working with beds that have been naturally loosened and prepared for you. Now, we prefer not disturbing the soil, and most other cover crops need digging in after winter, which is not really in line with our no-dig approach. White mustard, on the other hand, dies back naturally in frost, leaving behind a straw-like mulch that protects the surface. If it does survive until spring, then you can simply cut it back, but the trick is to leave it a couple of weeks to break down before you sow or plant into the bed. That way, the soil is both protected and primed without ever needing to lift a spade.
The best time to sow mustard seed here in the UK is from August through to October, giving the plants a chance to establish before winter sets in. If you leave it until November, growth slows right down and it simply will not get going. So aim to sow by mid-October at the latest. It's perfect for beds that have just finished a summer crop. So in this bed where we've finished harvesting our onions and carrots, instead of leaving the soil bare, we'll throw in some mustard seeds and they'll quickly cover the bed with a protective green layer. One thing to watch for though is that because white mustard is part of the brassica family, the same as cabbages and broccoli, you need to think about crop rotation. If you follow mustard with more brassicas the next season, you increase the risk of soil-borne diseases like clubroot building up in the soil. It's better to grow a different crop family the following season. Legumes such as peas and beans are a great choice because they fix nitrogen and benefit from the improved soil structure. Root crops like carrots and beetroot also do well because the soil is looser after the mustard roots have worked through it.
With no dig, this process really couldn't be any easier. The first step though is to prepare the bed, but thankfully preparation is minimal. There's no need to dig at all. Simply take your rake and then level the surface, removing any large weeds in the bed if there are any. If the soil is compact, then just lightly rake the surface to make it easier for the seeds to germinate. The soil doesn't have to be in perfect condition or anything, because mustard is very forgiving and will germinate even in rough ground. Okay, once the bed is clear, it is time to sow the mustard. Now, Mr. Sheffield managed to pick up quite a large bag from my local garden centre for a couple of quid. So that just goes to show that what a good budget option that cover crops can be. So you should be able to easily find some of this from your local garden centre. So to sow, take a handful of seed and scatter it evenly across the bed. Aim for a light sprinkling, similar to if you were spreading grass seed. You're not after neat rows or anything like that. Don't worry too much if it's too thick in some areas, as it's not really that fussy. Okay, so that is most of my packet used. So the next stage is to grab your rake and just lightly rake it in so that the seed has good contact with soil. Okay, got some leaves on there. So the next stage is to grab your watering can and give this a good watering in. So that's a whole watering can there on this bed. So that is the job done basically. So from here you can pretty much leave it alone. Within a week you will see tiny seedlings emerging, and in 2 to 3 weeks the bed will be completely covered in lush green growth. It's a cheap, quick and easy way to protect and improve your soil right through the winter months.
Because it's not a hardy perennial, mustard will not survive frost in the UK. Usually by January or February it starts to die back, but that's not a bad thing. The dead plant material forms a natural mulch which will continue to protect the soil and add organic matter right where you need it. So what do you need to do when spring comes around? If the mustard has been killed off by frost, you can simply leave the mulch in place and the beds are ready to be planted straight into. If we do happen to get a mild winter and the mustard is still alive in early spring, it's important to cut it down before it starts to flower. If you leave it too long, it can set seed and you'll end up with mustard popping up all over the garden. The easiest way is to use a strimmer to cut down the plants to the soil. Try to do it in sections, maybe a third at a time, so that the smaller clumps decompose on the soil quicker. Timing is everything here. Aim to chop the plants at least 2 or 3 weeks before you want to sow or transplant your next crop. That window gives the greenery time to decompose, so it enriches the soil rather than interfering with germination. Many gardeners choose to dig in green manures, so they break down directly in the soil and act like a fertiliser for the next crop. We prefer to keep things simple and stick with no-dig methods. Not only do we get the usual benefits of no-dig, but the biggest advantage is that it saves time and effort. Building soil health is so important, and cover cropping is just one of the tools we have to do that. The truth is, it's much better to ditch the fertiliser and focus on soil health instead. In this video, we show you why, so make sure you watch that next.